Well, in my earlier videos about the mood flood, I think there are some misunderstandings which are to be expected, as this subject is one that is ongoing as far as my own investigation and understanding into the matter. I hate to use the word evolving because it's not degenerating. It is creating a semblance of order through carefully designed processes. Now, it is changing, but for the better, I think. And let's talk about what it is as far as I know right now. Back to the mud flood. I don't pretend to know, nor would I pretend, but I don't even think that I'm close to knowing what happened when and where. Now, do I think that it relates mostly to the biblical flood of Noah? Yes. And do I believe that some of these buildings are carryovers from the technology and civilization of the people before the flood? I most certainly do. And I have quite a few reasons why, and I have stated that I thought that many of these discoveries of these structures happened when people split apart after the Tower of Babel event and the confusion of the languages. The state of archaeology, history, and the entire discipline of sociology is such a shambles that you can quite readily guess in almost every case that when some structure is found, they will assume that the people at the time who built the structure not only lived much longer ago than would be possible. They'll say 10,000 years, a lot, but any number above 6,000 years is completely acceptable because that puts it in the realm of being contrary to the biblical timeline. And that's not what I'm doing. When I'm saying that certain structures are more ancient than anybody realizes, and I say it predates Noah's flood, that doesn't put it back as far as 6,000 years. I'm certain I'll be called names, and that my postulations and my conjecture based on the facts and the evidence that you will see in this video later will be dismissed readily based on the notion that it could be so much older. And I see with the mud flood information, a lot of people are assuming that I mean to say that it happened in recent times, as many others are saying nowadays in the 1800s. And some of it may be true, but when we're talking about a deluge and when we're talking about much of the stuff, I am not meaning that. I'm meaning that it could be from the flood called Noah's flood, the biblical flood, worldwide flood. And that is, I don't have the exact number in my head, but it's something like 4,000 years ago, 4,500 years ago, I think. So I'm saying that it could be that old. And then back to the state of sociology, archaeology, history, and such, as much as they'll say that things are 10,000 years old with no problem, they'll also dismiss our ancestors in a rude and disrespectful way. They'll say that they were not capable of doing anything other than building structures for religious ceremonies and burying the dead. Temples and tombs, that's what it always seems to be, right? Temples and tombs, temples and tombs. I say that is bunk. If they find bones, stones, and teeth in a cave, they'll say that everybody lived in a cave wearing animal skins. They had no concept of color, no concept of technology of any kind, and they'll not even think about the fact that perishable items wouldn't last and wouldn't show themselves as evidence as easily, right? And you'd have to look for them in different ways, especially with the worldwide flood. When you start to do that, and you understand the fact that when you think about the past, you have to use your imagination. As much as they want you to about the cosmos, you should be using your imagination, that the people of the past had colorful clothing. Maybe they had things made out of temporary duration materials that were colorful and wonderful, but there's no evidence of them now because of the nature of them. Fresh flowers wouldn't last 4,500 years under half a mile or 4 miles of water or whatever the case was. So I think that we need to revisit this stuff. Now, the Wise Up channel does that very well, and I'm going to show you something that is similar, and I want you to think of the fact that, yes, if people populated the earth before a giant deluge, as I believe they did, and they were extremely intelligent, because evolution, in as much as it's anything real, is degenerative change. Just go to your local Walmart and you'll find out. Just watch out for the cameras. As I sat eating lunch looking across at a Walmart, and they set up a camera that looked like a cross between an astronomical telescope and a sniper's scope. And then the crew that built it on a tripod had it aimed down at the parking lot, sighted in and everything, hooked up a whole bunch of wires to it, and then they put a giant box around it that looks like one of the other air conditioning covers and sealed it off, and I never saw it again. That's not me depicted there. I'm quite slim or athletically built. I don't eat at Walmart. I don't go to Walmart. And I think one thing does have to do with another in this case. So now I just have a short clip from the news in Cleveland, and it is about exactly everything that I'm talking about. Now my dog decided to spaz out.
6:44, welcome back. Only on 41 Action News, a water main break led to an interesting discovery or rediscovery of our city's history.
A tunnel that closed decades ago is now turning a simple fix into a complex project. And 41 Action News anchor Richard Sharp takes us into the tunnel to see it before it's ever changed. Richard?
Yeah, we're here at 27th in Cleveland. You can see the road closed here. But look, just past the road closed signs, and you can see these big metal plates on huge holes. What engineers and repair crews found here, they say, is rare. It was supposed to be an easy fix. A couple days and done. Have you ever seen anything like this?
I've never seen pedestrian tunnels like this in Kansas City ever.
When crews dug up a leaking 16-inch water main at 27th in Cleveland, it led them to this. So right now we're right underneath the intersection.
Right in the middle.
A tunnel to the city's past, closed off for decades. It was built so children wouldn't have to walk across what was once a busy street to the Greenwood School, once one of the biggest elementaries in the district.
I get a lot of customers say they used to go to school across the street. They said it used to be real clean, lit up, looked real nice.
A lot of people remember the tunnel, but no one seems to know exactly when it was built. Best guess by repair crews, the 1940s. But get this, the water main that went underneath the tunnel was dated to 1904. One of the most interesting things about these tunnels is the layout. It's just like an X, like an intersection, but it's set up at a different angle. So if you wanted to go just across the street, the kids would have had to come down one hallway and go down another. The tunnel was closed off sometime in the 80s, according to locals, fenced off for good. Sort of.
Oh man, homeless, rats, cats, the trash. First we thought it was a basement to our building, but as we went down there, it was the tunnels. That's the first time, in my history that I've seen this.
Now, this tunnel will be split up to make way for a new water main.
Yeah.
So you're going to basically plow through this wall and continue it down the middle of the street.
Right.
Wow. Okay, back here live, you can see the overgrown cage right there that's kind of fenced off. That is the entrance, one of 4 entrances at this intersection that goes to the tunnel. Fix should take several weeks. What's interesting about all of this is this tunnel was actually built before the Public Works Department existed. So that's why it's been kind of an eyesore and a problem to deal with ever since then for not only the city, but also for businesses that work around here. Live at 27th in Cleveland, I'm Richard Sharp, 41 Action News. Richard Sharp, 41 Action News.
If not for this report, you wouldn't have heard anything about this. They're planning to get rid of it. Of course, they say it's an eyesore, but think about it. It's a tunnel. How can it be an eyesore. The authorities are already keen on getting rid of it because of the fact that it is predating the public works, and they have lines running around it or underneath it dated back to 1904. And that also tells you that they didn't want to mess with it. It was very well constructed. They have so many misleading statements about it, or maybe not misleading intentionally, but just saying that it looks like it's from the 1940s. Maybe that's true. Maybe the technology and the construction of it is more advanced than what it should be, and they're just mentioning the fact that that is the case. They don't talk about the length of the tunnel or the limits of the tunnel. And I happen to know that this particular tunnel, through my additional research here, reaches out and underneath of Lake Erie, which is a great lake, and it goes for an indeterminate distance. And I don't put much credence into this little thing, this little part of a map, but it's interesting nonetheless that there would be on a map a vehicular tunnel system laid out way out on the lake. Now, what I think happened was they were drawing the map in application and just drew it out on the lake just to cut and paste, drop it in, or fit it in, or duplicate it. You know how you're copying, one thing to make another proposed highway or something. But the thing about it is, when you look at it, it said proposed tunnel interchange, and you have to start with a tunnel to have a tunnel interchange. And there was something added later, maybe to throw you off the scent. So, in case you're not familiar with the area of Lake Erie, there is no such thing known to exist, such as the channel in and around or underneath Lake Erie, or any of the other Great Lakes for that matter, as far as I know, which existed far long before the Waze app was ever made. So something is fishy about this, and I didn't even get into the transatlantic tunnel, but I'll start just by saying that I noticed similarities between the tube in London and the Holland Tunnel in New York City. Okay, so the fact that I found that the tunnel in New York City, one of them had completely different structures built, and its history predated the official history. It became very, very moody, as they say, and I think perhaps there was a tunnel in place that went who knows how far, and perhaps all the way to jolly old England. But that is quite a bit of conjecture, and we'll see once we look into it a bit more. So now the tiles don't match up exactly, but just the similarity, and it could just be the usefulness of the mostly white glossy tile in this case, but there's just a slight greenish tint to it. I notice these types of things. Now, this is when the Holland Tunnel was made. They had quite a bit of fanfare about it, and it seems a lot of the buildings and things were in place. They always do this thing, and it may just be a natural result, but that they have this construction, and then it changes, like the people constructing, the whole crew changes over, the ownership, the engineers in charge. There's always a shift, a changing of the guard. And then they have like these types of things that are like higher tech, although it's completely silly looking, hard to take seriously, but it may have been in place, already before. If you look at some of these pictures, it just doesn't seem, like that.
Now, there's this movie in 1935 from the UK called Tunnel Under the Atlantic, or Transatlantic Tunnel. And in the movie, there's a lot of high-tech stuff. It's supposed to be, it's a sci-fi movie. It's supposed to be in the future type thing. But I haven't seen the movie yet. I'd probably like to see that. It is fascinating, just based on all the other research I've done. And wouldn't it be wild if the movie called Transatlantic Tunnel or whatever had existed already? They like to do that stuff. And then there was a book in I think they said the 70s about it, and it mentioned some specifics you can pause to read, but some technological things that are quite interesting and predictive as well in some cases. There's just so much architecture there that's been there for so long. I did have a reader in the comments mention something, since I said, something about the Freemasons and how, they're in their very name. It just may be, and I came up with this on my own, that maybe the Freemasons have all these secrets and stuff because as Masons, they are the ones that uncover these hidden treasure troves first, because they're doing the masonry, the construction, and so they gain the knowledge and therefore the power and therefore the control over everything because of the free masonry that they encounter. Now, this last little bit is about a subway underneath Cincinnati that nobody seems to know about, that was completely built and never used by a single individual. And I keep finding this in almost every major city. Almost every major city has a subway either was at one time under construction and changed hands or whatever, but oftentimes just seemingly never built or used. Although if you talk to people, like when I spoke with my grandpa years ago, he talked about these electric trolley cars and trains that went everywhere. Out in the boondocks, these things went and made stops. It's insane. Where have they all gone? Well, that was covered by that documentary, Who Killed the Electric Car, I think. I haven't seen it, but I've seen the pictures. They had smashed up all these wonderful electric train cars that went everywhere. And now I'm wondering, did these electric train cars also not at one time go through these tunnels? Because it would make way more sense to have an electric train going through a tunnel rather than the idiotic thing that we do with gas internal combustion engines going through the tunnel, because it's a ventilation nightmare, and if all that stuff breaks down and you're caught there in a traffic jam, you're done. Electric trains everywhere, and I have a lot more stuff that I'm uncovering, but yeah, tunnels everywhere. I mean, did you see it earlier on? I didn't mention it, but there's a salt mine underneath Lake Erie in Cleveland that I encountered in my research about this one tunnel discovery that is 2,000 feet underneath the ground, and they're dynamiting out salt. And I guess it's a large salt producing mine, and they dynamite out the salt, and it's so deep, 2,000 feet underneath, that the shocks from the dynamite blasts aren't even felt or noticed above ground, so it's incredible. There could be all kinds of stuff going on under your very feet, and you don't know it. You can't hear it. You can't feel it. But ventilation is an issue for all that stuff. So it would make sense if there's an entire worldwide civilization that was buried in a worldwide flood, that there would be what amounts to tunnels, even if they weren't made after the fact. There would just be natural tunnel systems formed by all this flooding. So, yeah, all kinds of stuff to be found. It's quite exciting. Until next time.